The subject of this week is about the reactions to globalization, and here for this week I would like to share with you this document from two scholars from the Harvard University, Pippa Norris and Ronald Inglehart, another social scientist from the Michigan University, and this document is called Cultural Backlash. It's a kind of summary of other articles that those scholars have wrote about the emergence of new authoritarian and populist authoritarian parties all over the world, and in particular in the Western world. You have for the practical classes a reading about this topic. I also from those two authors. So my idea for the theoretical class is also to study this document and to combine this document with their article. They also write a book called Cultural Backlash about the same main idea. So this document, here you can find the structure. Before you have a brief description of the conceptual and theoretical framework, what is the meaning of authoritarian populism, and what is the main idea behind his cultural backlash theory. Then they classify European parties, they talk more about Europe and about the US, and made some conclusions and implications. Okay. So about concepts and theory, they talk about the populist authoritarian challenge. Then in our course we can understand it as a challenge or reaction against the general process of globalization. And we have examples all over the world, and in particular the Western world. We have Donald Trump in the US, we have in the UK the UKIP, and then also the Brexit phenomenon. But those two, maybe the most famous because of their effect on politics. We have that they're part of a broader phenomenon disrupting party competition, and we have parties and examples of other populist authoritarian. For example, in France, we have the French National Front, Swiss People's Party, Austrian Freedom Party, Swedish Democrats, Greece Golden Dawn, Italy's Lega Nord, Dutch Party for Freedom, and since more or less 1 year and 2 years, even in Spain, we have the party Vox, which is similar to those ones. Here we can see how the vote for authoritarian populist parties has increased since the 40s, and now since the 2010 we have the highest level or a rate of vote for these parties. Here we can see more or less that they affect that they receive more and more support in many countries in Western Europe. So what is a populist rhetoric? They have an anti-establishment rhetoric calling about for a kind of popular sovereignty against what they see as the elites, the official or the traditional politicians, the parties, etc., the intellectuals, the experts, the media, etc. This is what the one component, the populist component of those parties. And then they have the authoritarian components, which can be measured by some authoritarian values like the emphasis on security issues, conventionism, also hostility to outsiders, Islamophobia, misogyny, anti-Semitism, xenophobia in general, and also the idea of loyalty, where they emphasize a leader. In this case, like they tend towards leaders that can, according to their view, protect the tribe. Norris and Inglehart say that the danger is that populism unlocks the door for strongman leaders to claim sweeping powers and hampered by conventional safeguards in liberal democracy, promoting authoritarian values. I mean, of course, the main idea or danger of those parties is that they slowly erode the liberal democracy that we know in our Western countries. There's some explanations for this phenomenon, and Inglehart and Norris have this cultural backlash framework to explain. The idea is that there is a rise of progressive and post-materialist values during the 1970s in Western societies. Values towards more LGBT rights, same-sex marriage, secular values, cosmopolitan values, open-mindedness values towards diversity of lifestyles and people. Supports for international cooperations, but also skeptical towards political institutions. And this catalyzed a kind of cultural backlash among social conservatives. I mean, the idea behind this emergence of populist authoritarian parties is that a kind of emergence of a sector of society. We'll see that's normally a more older sector with less educated, that they make a kind of reaction, a cultural reaction against this feminist, LGBT rights, cosmopolitan, multicultural, secular values. It's a kind of reaction. If so, Inglehart and Norris say authoritarian populist values and votes to be predicted by generation, college education, urbanization, religiosity, race, ethnicity, and sex, as well as by socially conservative attitudes and authoritarian values. But at the same time, there is another thesis close to the other one, is the alternative economic insecurity thesis. The idea is that the authoritarian reaction against modernity by petite bourgeoisie, fearing downward mobility, the squeeze between big business and organized labor. Today, emergence of new underclass in global markets, low skill, low wage, benefit-dependent, poor job security, vulnerable to social risk. This produces that if so, authoritarian populism should be concentrated among economically marginalized, unskilled workers, those lacking college degrees, unemployed, living in inner cities, welfare dependent, and subject to feelings of economic insecurity and lack of social mobility. So the idea that there is on one side a cultural conservative reaction against the new modern and postmodern movements, multicultural, feminist, more ecological, etc., that is mixed up or brought together with a fear of economic insecurity from especially let's say the white, or in particular the white male workers, of course, in the context of globalization. And the mix of those two phenomena creates, this kind of populist authoritarian emergence. We talk about the dimensions of party competition, some cleavage. We see here's the cleavage of what they call the authoritarian populist, because there's also other kind of cleavage, for example the libertarian populist, libertarian pluralist, authoritarian pluralist, but they're focusing on this kind of, let's say, right-wing populist authoritarian cleavage. We see the evolution of both of those kind of authoritarian populist parties in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe. Here the generational turnover in the electorate, where we can see